possible for there to be greater plant diversity because the wolves are able to manage the herbivory, the population of deer and other animals that eat the plants. And the greater plant diversity contributes to better soil health, to better river habitats, and also to greater animal biodiversity, and to a wider variety of plants, animals, and habitats that humans can benefit from. And that diversity contributes to human culture. It contributes to the sustainability of the ecosystems. And so the presence of wolves are one indicator. And what's interesting is that our ancestors historically gifted us a very powerful story about wolves. They said that wolves are our companion, and humans and wolves together named all the biodiversity. And that's powerful because our ancestors actually understood that the animal, the wolf, Maingan, that was responsible for ensuring there was tremendous biodiversity, of course, would be an animal that we could associate with the practice of naming that diversity. And so that knowledge was already in our communities for thousands of years. And it was through many hundreds, thousands of research dollars, publications, and so on that ecologists have come to some of the very same conclusions. But we actually already knew that. So imagine if research in ecology, instead of having to spend so much money and so much effort to prove things that we already knew, could have started from the very foundation that we already had and started doing research moving forward. And so the concept then of well-being indicators for us is about relationships. And one of the ancient stories about wolves is that humans and wolves would part ways, and it was our responsibility to take care that wolves were still thriving, but that there would come a time when humans and wolves were treated in the same way. And in the United States, there was a policy for a long time that supported the killing of wolves. And as we saw, wolves were killed, biodiversity went down, indigenous people and their cultures were suppressed, displaced, lost land, and experienced discrimination. And again, this is another powerful indicator because it's not just an indicator of ecosystem health, but of societal health. And a forest economy, a region with thriving wolves is one that has thriving culture, thriving education, thriving economy, thriving health. And that is a very complex well-being indicator, but it's indigenous peoples' research that can express the complexity of that well-being indicator. I would like to contrast that with an old colleague of mine and how that person understands well-being. So I have an old colleague, and I hadn't connected with him in a long, long time. And it turns out after so many years, and this person is an engineer, that he sort of left academia, though he's still a professor, and he now focuses on supporting people's well-being. And his latest invention is an iron contraption. It's like a piece of iron. And if you look at it and turn it on, it shines green light right in your face. And his argument was that he was looking at some of the research, and there seems to be this concept that if people are exposed to the green light of a shaded forest, it foster peace and tranquility and establish well-being. And so his concept is that if you close your eyes and you absorb that iron-made green light contraption for about 10 minutes, that will be helpful for your well-being. And what's ironic about this approach and the contrast it presents between indigenous research and research of the dominant society is striking and worth talking about in a little bit of detail. So for my colleague, well-being is about the role that green light plays that comes from a certain understanding of people's experience in forests. And so somebody will live their life in the dominant society every day going through stress, pressure, toxicity, meanness, financial issues. But as long as they come back home and look at the green light, then all of those bad things in society temporarily will go away. That can't be more than the opposite of what Indigenous research tells us about well-being. Indigenous researchers have no problem saying that there was probably something good about the green light of forests. But it's more about what are the human, animal, plant relationships that made that green light possible. And the green light is only the byproduct. What creates the well-being is whether you're somebody that participates in the activities that create the forest habitat and maintain the forest habitat that produces the green light. And so the culture, the subsistence, the family life, the camaraderie with plants and animals, the knowledge, that is well-being. That's what fosters well-being. Moreover, in Indigenous research, it tells us that it's also part of well-being, as many of you in the room do in your daily lives, to fight for those relationships. When I fight for Indigenous people's rights, when I fight for local community rights, Afro-descendant rights, when I fight for those things, I'm fighting for those relationships that give rise to well-being. And that is a worthwhile way of life. And ironically, that same professor that created this contraption, which is made of iron, which I don't think is created from a very good supply chain, years ago, this same person was complaining to me that professors don't get paid enough. You know, professors always complain that they don't get paid enough. And I remember, not in a conversation with this person, but in a conversation with somebody else, I said, well, what would you do instead of being a professor? And they said, oh, well, I could have been on Wall Street or a corporate lawyer. I just remember thinking, well, for an Indigenous person, like, all I can do and all I know how to do is fight for our rights. And that's where I derive my well-being from. There's no alternative. I'm not weighing, do I fight for Indigenous rights or do I go to Wall Street? That's not even an option for me. But as Indigenous people, we understand that we're fighting for something. We're fighting for those relationships. We're fighting for the context for the relationships that one day could ensure that wolves, Maingan, thrive again. That could ensure that every day we are able to walk through forests and participate in the forest-based cultures and practices that maintain those healthy ecosystems. That's well-being. And that's how we understand what it would mean for there to be indicators of well-being. And we have a lot through our memories to share with the broader society. There's so much about well-being that the broader society doesn't understand. You know, for example, in the Great Lakes region in the United States, there are different historic sites and locations. And the dominant society only understands how some of them relate to well-being. So, for example, there's often areas like one in the Great Lakes on the Ontario side called the Majikaning. Majikaning means fence or place of the fence. Majikaning fish weirs. It's thousands of years old. It's a place where Anishinaabe and other native people trapped fish. And the dominant society, once they saw that there was probably an old fish weir system there, they're like, oh, right, we fish, they fish. They had a fish culture. They derived enjoyment from fish. So if it's something really obvious like fishing, they kind of understand how those practices might have been tied to a certain understanding of well-being. Yet most members of the dominant society, if they walk within a forest canopy and they experience native biodiversity of the forest understory, they love it. They love it. but it never dawns on them that that biodiversity, that forest understory, had to also have been maintained by subsistence activities, like systematic prescribed burning, the use of fire. And they don't understand, though it's changing today, thanks to research that's coming out too slow. They could just ask indigenous people without having to spend so much money researching it. But for Anishinaabe people, fire, the concept of fire, was baked into culture, ceremony, identity. It was part of well-being to participate in practices related to fire. And so certain biodiversity in our region, the biodiversity that produced the nutritious diets, the healthy foods, the cultural relationships, it was dependent on fire. And fire is not something that one person does or feels. It takes a whole society to prescribe fire, to manage fire. And so another well-being indicator is the presence not just of fire, but communities involved in fire. And that the well-being indicator doesn't just point to some humans burning, but the culture of fire, the ceremony of fire, the identities based on fire. And again, I've just talked about a few things. I've talked about wolves, I've talked about fire. You see where this could go, many hundreds, many thousands of well-being indicators. And as Indigenous researchers, we're in the unique position to open up this world. And before I close, a few final remarks about why Indigenous memory is important to asking research questions, and why Indigenous research is one of the best positioned methods of research for understanding well-being. I have a lot of researchers that approach me with various problems that they have in their research with Indigenous people. So I have a lot of non-Indigenous researchers that they believe that I'm the person to listen to every challenge that they face. And I remember one person approached me. They were working in a part of the world with different Indigenous people, and they were asking people about what their experiences were with climate change. So they're asking subsistence practitioners, elders, what they were experiencing from climate change. And the researcher talked to me and said, well, I'm really frustrated because every time I asked them about climate change, they kept telling me that climate change was happening because the mining industry was continuing to deforest their territory. And the researcher said, well, they don't seem to know what climate change is because they didn't say anything about the change in temperature or the changes in precipitation and rainfall. And I told them, I said, are you kidding me? I go, they gave you a far more sophisticated answer, because what they actually told you was all at once that the land was changing, and of course deforestation affects the experience of the climate. They told you that. They told you about the causes of the overall climate change, and they told you that the broader society wasn't fighting for people's rights. They gave you all of that in a few sentences. They didn't need to engage in interdisciplinary communion. They didn't need to produce a whole bunch of papers or reports. They just needed a few sentences, and you were so convinced that all climate change was some simple form of temperature and weather that you missed the fact that a superior researcher was telling you a very profound truth. And when we think about well-being indicators in relationship to forests, that idea of that green lamp that I was talking about, it continues to haunt us. The green lamp mentality of well-being in forests is the exact same mentality that created problematic forms of forest conservation. They ask, well, how do we mitigate climate change with forest conservation? And they think, well, wait a minute, before human-caused climate change, what we remember are just that it must have been green forests. So let's just preserve the greenness of the forests as a solution to climate change. That's no different from the person that experiences a bad day and needs to stare at a green lamp for their well-being. But as Indigenous people, we know that prior to human-caused climate change, it wasn't the greenness of the forests, it was the human activities that were maintaining the landscape, that were not dependent on certain inputs for their way of life. It was those human activities, not all of which are green in the sense of the color, but involve many colors. Those were what created the sustainability. Those are what created the resilience. Those are what created the ability to continue and to reproduce a way of life. And that is in our memory. And we ask research questions about that memory. And I heard from some of the colleagues that were presenting earlier that non-native people, non-Indigenous people aren't asking the right questions about land displacement. My own community and culture was displaced multiple times historically, and if you look at what non-Indigenous researchers say, they said we were displaced because we simply couldn't pay our taxes. That is a terrible research supposition. But in Indigenous research, when we start bringing back things like the ending of protections for the wolf population, the suppression of fire, and all the relationships related to those things, and the importance of maintaining those relationships, our memories drive the research questions. And I encourage everybody here, get into your memory, ask those questions. And for the youth that are there, part of our well-being is to fight for our rights. We know that that's part of our well-being. It's our only option. What other life would we be living but working to support the relationships that overall we know need to be in place for our well-being? I'm going to be watching YouTube and the event, the conference. I'm honored to have this invitation to connect with you all. And you all are going to have a fantastic time communing together at this wonderful event. Thank you, Ilepa.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Professor White. Let's appreciate him well. It's a very insightful and deep talk. I've lost the screen. I don't know if that means they're unable to hear us or follow us. But as they're setting that up, we have a small activity. It's called a Mentimeter. I don't have much experience on that, but I understand it's a new tool that helps us to do a snapshot tally of our thoughts and ideas. And Ilepa, being an innovator in knowledge creation and research, will be leading us in doing that. But as we do that, I don't know if Professor Arun Agrawal is following and Professor Saronio Lesena. I don't know if they are connected and if they're following, but we have a couple of minutes to run this exercise Mentimeter, which is basically a snapshot study of ideas. And I think Valeria Amit is going to lead us in that.
Well, this is a youthful space, digital technology. We are a little analog, but we are trying. So Kenya, the youth delegated upwards. But anyway, so there is a QR code document, which I don't know whether it has been distributed. Ilepa team, is a QR code for the youth Mentimeter distributed? Okay, so essentially it's very simple. I know some of us get scared when it's technology. It's just a button. So it is really a questionnaire app, which you just sign in. There is a question, you answer, and move on. Okay? It's very, very straightforward. And then we'll see the outcome live here. So I know most of us, none of us has a Mulika Muizi. Like generally we have smartphones. And we'll excuse those of us who may not. The Ilepa team strategically place themselves to help anyone who needs help. on this. Kenya, are we ready? So they scan this. On the side is the same, on the side screen and the front screen. And you just follow the prompt and keep following until the last question. It should be about 10 minutes at most. If
Thank you, Oleriamet. Just use your camera to scan that. I've just tried with mine, and it actually does.
can you raise up your hand if you are there already?
To a page
Please,
called Menti.
just show if you're already on the page. Okay. Keep going. We have about 40% already in.
And you'll respond, and then it'll prompt you to go to the next page.
Yes.
And then once you respond, it will tell you, please wait. You've already responded to this question. You can just use your phone camera. You point it to that bar graph there, and it should be able to give you a link. But if you also have a code scanner, you can also use that. Even from a distance, you should be able to point it out there. And I believe also those who are following on YouTube, you can also access this. You're also invited to participate. It's a new way of doing quick studies. I remember previously when we used to go to workshops, we'll fill papers and people will need to...
Okay, so I'm told we need to do the result of the first question.
Only?
No. Quickly, all of them. Are you done?
We've lost the bar again. Technology can sometimes be a little bit challenging, but once you get the hang of it, it makes work easy. These are learning opportunity. Maybe these are tools that we can borrow and employ in our respective organizations.
It's really amazing when you are successful. You will see the graphs, you will see everything live, like immediately, if they can get it right here.
Mine is still telling me, please wait, you've already responded to this question. So I think, are we struggling with it, or are we all at that page? Just show by, okay, I'm being given the sign that we moved to the next stage. I think people have already responded.
How many have responded to the first question?
By show
of hand, please.
By show of hands.
Anybody successfully in the reach the second question? None. So it means it has to be prompted. Change.
I think, I don't know if he's still going to listen to us. He had made a submission that his community too was displaced on assumption that they never paid taxes. So as an indigenous person, I'm interested to know, did they recover or they are still in ICU? Thank you.
I don't know if Professor Kyle is still online, and if he's connected. I don't think we have a signal. Unfortunately, I'm not able to answer that, but maybe when he joins, he might be able to respond. But any other comment from anyone, or something to add, or a perspective that maybe could support or augur what Professor Kyle was saying? I'm sorry, I don't know your name yet, but the gentleman here right in front of Professor Kwesaba would like to say something. And then after that, you can pass the mic to Professor Kwesaba. And then I think we might have to stop there, because I hope we'll not be keeping Professor Arun waiting for long.
My name is Deko. Deko means satisfaction. I was the last born in a family of one wife of 15. So I was the last born. So my mama said, I'm satisfied. Thanks God. First of all, I would like to thank LEPA, because they have brought us together. I've been in research for many years. Did research in my community, did research in Boni community, and part of my sister here, where she comes from. They had 33 rice varieties, local varieties. But today, I don't know whether they are still there. Now, in my research, working with the indigenous communities, there are some terminologies that are very important. And I am, according to presentation by Dr. White, all indigenous communities, they have a relationship. And one of the things that came out is that this issue of relationship, what made us go on for quite some times until there was interruption, was this thing called relationship among the communities. That's the key thing. Relation means here, relationship with your neighbor, your community, relation with the ecosystem. So if you don't have relation with the local people, in my language we say, if you're not having relation with the people, means you'll become poor. If you have no relationship with your land, ownership, you'll also become poor. One time when I was doing my master's about grazing blocks, by the way, the current poverty in pastoral community, particularly the Maasai land where ranching was established, the genesis was Swinnerton Plan, which gave way to Kenya Livestock Development Program, which created ranches. Now ranches were established in here and also in northern Kenya, but northern Kenya they refused. All right? But it has really impact on us. So relationship is key thing in our indigenous community. When you have relation with your community, when you have relation with the ecosystem, you will prosper. But because of the colonization, some things were imposed on us. So we were.
Thank you.
So the other indicator I want to say is that apart from relationship, is this thing called ownership. Ownership in terms of land. If the ownership of your land is taken away, definitely you become poor. The other indicator I realized during my research about is inclusivity and ecosystem health integrity. Thank you.
Good. We'll be having a session where we'll provide the space where people can articulate their views and the thoughts they have. I see the Mentimeter has worked, and really is a truly amazing tool. In a snapshot, you can see the outlay of the representations of the various institutions and sectors here. So the question is, what spaces are you most active in as a youth participant? I think we all answered, despite the fact that we are youth, but I represent youth, or we are connected to youth. And as per the theme of the conference, the majority of us are from research and education, 25% are from traditional knowledge and practices, advocacy and climate change, and nature conservation in forest. Do you want to go to the next one, or we just go? Okay, good. So now let's go to the next question. I believe in your phones, you should be able now to see the next question. Diversity of indigenous peoples. Which indigenous identity or livelihood system best represents your background? Yes, as you feel, it updates. You can see very interesting results on real time. I wish the IBC of Kenya can borrow a leaf from these, where you can see the elections of your leaders are in real time. So from what we see, pastoralists are dominant in this particular space. Not surprising, given that we're in their landscape. The least represented are the fisher folk. We also see forest people, agro-pastoralists, hunter-gatherers, and others. So what does others mean? People who are not necessarily, who are not listed in this group, or specify. Okay, I'm being guided there. Very interesting tool. I think I can still see people yes. Let's go to the next one. But now you get a feel and a closer understanding of what is happening. Gender balance, how do you identify? This is becoming an interesting topic, but let me not delve into that. It's okay. Male, female. Everybody has a gender, and they're not preferring not to say. As I said, I don't want to be drawn into this conversation, but male-dominated. Ilepa, something to look at to make sure that next time we have as many women and girls as men and boys. Okay, I'm big guided that we are within the constitutional requirement. I don't know what our sister from the Gender Commission has to say about that. Let me not invite our comments now, but is there a next question? Where do you come from? You can enter a word. You have a choice of 3. You can say, for example, Africa, and then your country, and then, I don't know if that's the purpose, but you could start with your continent, country, and region. Because you have a choice of 3. Okay, interesting. I've always seen these in publications, but I've never known how they are created. Now I know. This is very interesting. I've learned something here, which I'll be using in a meeting that I have next week. How many? So you can see the majority is from Kenya, but we have very good representation. United States, Aldama Ravine, Michigan, you're all welcome. What's your highest level of education? I don't know how we quantify indigenous education. If you have a PhD in indigenous education, okay. Expert on indigenous knowledge or other? Good. We have a lot of PhDs in this house, over 10%. And wow, this is a very learned room. Yes, so far 53% have a master's and above, bachelor's degree, diploma, and very good representation of experts on indigenous knowledge. I wonder if we can create a Mendy on indigenous terms. Yes, I mean, so that we have an indigenous way of gauging this, but right now, this is the forum that we have. Next, please. Very engaging and very interesting. In your opinion, what is the biggest barrier of meaningful youth engagement in indigenous-led research? I hope we are not keeping Professor Arun waiting for long. Okay, good. In your opinion, what is the biggest barrier to meaningful youth engagement in indigenous-led research? Lack of resources, limited mentorship. So for the leading is limited mentorship. Nope, it's changing with time. Exclusion from decision making. Leading, the list being statement 6. Do you know what that means? Leading is exclusion from decision making, and then inadequate funding. And then that is lack of resources. I wonder if inadequate funding and resources are the same. Limited mentorship of academic support. The mentors in the house, please note that. Limited mentorship, it's ranking number 4 now. Inadequate funding and lack of resources, very strong if you combine the two of them. And then exclusion from decision-making leading. Very interesting. Very interesting and insightful. Next. Next question. Do you belong to any professional body, institution, or organization or network? Yes. A lot of them do. 100% so far. Yes, I ran my own initiative. 9% no. I'm participating as an individual. 6% other. Interesting. I don't know what other means. If it's no. Yes, I represent an organization. So we are all in a network, an institutional framework of some sort. Yes, I ran my initiative. 14%. But the clear majority for sure is yes, I represent an organization or network. So we are networked and in institutions. If affiliated, what's the name of your group or organization? Don't shy. Yeah, be proud of your organization. Submit. All right, Masai Mara University, Impact University of Toronto, and Tito Impunity Creations, beautiful name. Ndala Trees, University of Michigan, Baringo, University of Michigan again, Koibateko Giek Women Organization. And how will you rate your participation in indigenous? Okay. How will you rate your participation in indigenous-led research in your community? How involved are you in indigenous peoples-led research in your community? Very high, moderate, so seems like people are involved. People are very involved because we see moderate and very high. Those are good indicators of involvement. Then very low is coming up, and then don't know. I guess what do not know means is they probably don't understand what indigenous-led research is. Very low involvement is 22%. Good, we can go to the next. You can see people are quite involved in indigenous-led research. In your opinion, what is the biggest barrier to meaningful youth engagement in indigenous-led research? I think we did that. And I think we need to pause since we are eating now into our time for our next presenter. I hope Professor Arun Agrawal, which of the following will most enhance your participation in indigenous-led research? First, I don't see the first. Funding and grants of youth-led initiatives. What motivates you most to be involved in indigenous-led research? Change, passion, indigeneity. Passion and change are clearly the strongest ones. Amazing. The others being partnership. All right. If you could propose one action to increase youth engagement in indigenous-led research, what will it be? One action to increase youth engagement. Funding, capacity building coming up quickly. More funding, more conversations and trainings, inclusion, scholarships, collaboration, inclusion funding, financial support funding and mentorship, capacity building. I think I could group all of those into three. Funding, okay, we've moved on. We should take the lead in promoting youth involvement in indigenous-led research. NGOs and CSOs, quickly displaced by youth themselves. Indigenous community leaders coming second, academic institutions. There's a race here. Indigenous community leaders, NGOs, academic institutions. Interesting, youth themselves is a strong first, followed by indigenous community leaders. Again, self-action, youth and indigenous community leaders. Internal, not external. Rank the following in order of importance to support youth engagement. Let's see which one comes up first. Access to funding, mentorship and training. Access is a quick race. Results are being populated. Mentorship and training. Mentorship and training, our first lead. Access to funding. Funding keeps propping up. And mentorship and training, capacity building. Using one word, describe how you feel about the future of indigenous-led research. Using one word, describe how you feel about the future of indigenous-led research. Promising. That's optimistic. Promising and optimistic are the vibrant. Promising, optimistic. That's how people feel about the future of indigenous-led research. Promising. There's potential, there's a good future. That's how people feel. Optimistic, hopeful. What are your expectations of this conference on indigenous-led research and education? A big network for all of us. A big network for all of us. That's the response that has come out. Professor Arun is ready to start in 2 minutes. So we should be winding this up. So I see a response here. After this, what next? What are your expectations of this conference? After this, what next? how can we incorporate AI with indigenous research, and how or what are the needs for the same? Very interesting question, I think. The future is going to be determined by the Internet of Things and artificial intelligence. So as we move forward with indigenous-led research, how do we incorporate, like, the tool that we're using right now, I'm sure is driven by AI, can make things easier. When is the next conference? And I could add to that, where will it be? When will there be another conference? Am I missing the next already? Maybe not. Maybe towards the end of the conference, we'll have answers for that. Policy for inclusive research. Okay. What are your expectations? Policy for inclusive research. Does this end here? No. The audience responded that the future is promising, so clearly I don't think it ends here. What models, methods, or standards exist on indigenous-led research? Okay. We should be winding these up so that we don't eat into Arun's time. The technical team there, if we could wind these up and switch to the live stream. Mentimeter. You might want to write that down and see how you can borrow an idea or two from ILEPA and use these in your respective trainings and workshops and meetings. Thank you. Professor Olesena and Arun Agrawal, sorry if we've kept you waiting. I hope the team on live stream has been also participating on the Mentimeter. But now we are at a stage where we can move in to have our next keynote address. We've already had one from Professor Kyle White. And thank you again, Professor Kyle White. But at this juncture, I don't see Professor Arun Agrawal. Are you there? If you could make a sound so that I can introduce you. Do we know if he's connected? Professor Arun Agrawal, I don't know how he defines himself these days, but days at McGill University, he used to be a political scientist. I took a class or two from him, and I've read a lot of his articles. I think all of us in academia agree that Professor Arun Agrawal now, who's in Notre Dame University, has been a very strong and resounding voice in academia on matters of indigenous peoples. So we are honored and happy to have him. And without much ado, allow me to pass the baton to him. As soon as you hear me, you can go on. But he'll be speaking to us basically from the point of view of the engagement of academic institutions and universities in this case on issues of indigenous peoples research, giving his own experiences as an academic who's taught in many universities. And he'll be speaking about how Western and academic institutions have evolved in their engagement with indigenous knowledge since his early years of research. And he'll also be giving us perspectives on how, on the current opportunities and challenges to further institutional support and global recognition. I see Professor there. Arun, I was just introducing you. I hope you can hear me.
Yeah, I can see everyone, and thank you. I'm very happy to be here, and excited that Himalayan has invited me to be a part of this meeting. I'm sorry I cannot be there in person, but happy that we can at least interact through this medium. So when I was having a conversation with Cameron about making a presentation, he asked me to talk about three things. The first was how have things or how have understandings of indigenous knowledge and indigenous peoples changed since the mid 90s, when I had initially written about indigenous and scientific knowledge. And he also asked me to talk a little bit about what I'm doing at Notre Dame and where some of that work is going. So I'll focus on these two parts of what Himalayan had said. Although I think there are many issues on which the conference itself is focused, perhaps these two are the closest to what I may be able to say. And even they have, I want to note that my understanding of indigenous knowledge is shaped very much by the contributions of those who have written about indigenous knowledge in the context of development. And so this is somewhat different from how we are now considering indigenous knowledge and thinking about it, because it has become a much broader area of scholarship and social activism as well. So, my initial work on Western and on the role of indigenous knowledge in Western academic institutions really tried to highlight the many ways in which those who see indigenous knowledge as somehow being inferior, or as not being relevant for contemporary questions, how are the different ways in which people try to reduce indigenous knowledge or reduce the relevance of indigenous knowledge. And my main purpose in that contribution was really to highlight the difficulty of separating indigenous and scientific knowledge. The many arguments that researchers invoked or that policymakers invoked to marginalize or to sideline indigenous knowledge seemed to me not to pass muster, not to stand up when one looked at them closely, whether it was the usefulness of knowledge or whether it was about how knowledge comes into being, or the basic sort of role of knowledge in supporting different kinds of social actions. And I think that is still true. And I think perhaps the one area in which there has been some change is a broader understanding today that indigenous knowledge is in fact very useful and can in fact be used for addressing, it can be used to address many both social and environmental challenges that we confront, that different societies confront, whether it is about adapting to climate change or about protecting species and biodiversity, or increasing the possibility or supporting the possibility of greater human beings living in greater harmony with nature. I was involved recently in IPBES's transformative change assessment, and one of the arguments in that assessment that we advanced was precisely the role of indigenous knowledge in advancing transformative change. So I think in that respect, within academic circles, there is a greater appreciation of the role of indigenous knowledge in addressing diverse social or environmental issues. I do, however, think that in many policy discussions and policy making situations, indigenous knowledge continues to be sidelined. And the current moment, at least in the United States, is one where there are many risks to working with indigenous knowledge, especially for those who are not well aligned with the current administration's policies or the current administration's views on what to do about the environment. So it's a general reversal that has occurred in the U.S. Not just about indigenous knowledge, but I would say in relation to nearly anything that one might consider as a progressive or as a forward-looking approach to thinking about what human beings should do and how we should relate to nature. I think for the most part, what we are seeing at present is a, a much greater focus on immediate short-term individually focused priorities rather than attention to future. So the attacks on science or the attacks on different dimensions of sustainability or on climate change or on health are all part of the same picture and all part of the same effort to focus on what is immediately and what is individually most attractive to different parts of the administration. And I think similar policies are, or similar inattention to indigenous knowledge is also, it may also be unfolding in other contexts. And in some ways, what's happening in the United States may, in fact, be even inspiration to others who want to undermine what has been accomplished over the last 20 to 30 years by those of us who care about issues of sustainability or rights, or whether human rights or other rights, rights to resources, or the challenges that confront us in the future. I think in this context, the work that I have been doing and started at Notre Dame is particularly appealing to me because the university asked me to work on an initiative that was titled Transformative Change for Sustainability, or just transformations to sustainability, which is an initiative to which the university continues to maintain its commitment. And so I think there are a number of things that we are doing as part of that initiative. Maybe one that is very consistent with Pact and the discussions that Andy White and I had when we talked about launching Pact is an initiative that I'm hoping to launch this year on supporting young leaders and researchers from lower middle income countries, but also from the US, to make a difference around issues that they identify as being important for change in their communities. So we are hoping to launch this initiative after some internal discussions around the early part of the next semester. And we're hoping to attract between 10 and 20 leaders, researchers from communities and indigenous groups around the world for working with faculty at Notre Dame and in the US, and also for them to partner with Notre Dame students and other students. I'm very hopeful that this initiative can be of interest and support to those who are part of Pact, but also more widely, including in Latin America, where Notre Dame has a substantial presence, and where I was recently involved in some discussions with a group of bishops who are working with very substantial indigenous groups gathering and representation that involves roughly about 400 indigenous groups in Latin America. So I'll definitely involve, share the call and the outlines of what we are trying to do with both Kyle White and with Andy White, and see, and with Pact partners, and see whether there is interest among those of us who have been trying to work on these issues to be involved in this initiative. We're also trying to do some work with the Vatican work with a number of universities in the Midwest of the United States to advance work on sustainability, especially that on data centers and AI, because as you may know, Pope Leo, who recently became the Pope, has issued a statement in which he very strongly questions the importance or the role of AI in humanity's future. And really, this seems to me to be a great basis on which to think more critically about how AI is being advanced and used in a lot of different countries and by a lot of different corporations, primarily, again, for highlighting and for advancing relatively narrow, short-term, individually focused economic or financial goals. So with that, I will stop. I think Kimaren had asked me to speak for about 15 minutes and see if there are any questions. Thank you so much.
Let's give a better appreciation to Professor Arun. Thank you very much, Professor. We appreciate your ability to join and make a keynote address. Since we have him on the line, I don't know if there's a burning question directly to him. We can take one or two before we usher in Professor Sarunela Sena. I see a hand there. We'll just take one or two and let's make them brief. Can somebody pass the microphone to him?
To me, I don't always hear very clearly what is being said there. So if you can also send the question on WhatsApp, then I can read the question and answer it.
Okay. So if someone can be texting him?
Yes, please go ahead.
So someone will text you the question. But
Thank you.
okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Hello? Yeah, thank you for your insightful presentation. My name is Stephen Meriki. I am a PhD candidate in my 5th year, and I study the Maasai people in Majimoto, Narosra, and Loita, looking at how the land subdivision affect the Maasai social relationship, including Osotua, the Elatia, the neighborhoods and all that. So my question, and I'm sure this cuts across, especially in Kenya, that there is a breach, there is a disconnect between research and policy making. And I think we need to ask you whether you have any, because for example, when I was doing my dissertation proposal defense, one of the audience asked me, you have a beautiful proposal, but how are you going to make sure that your findings and recommendations will find their way into the policy making agencies? And so my question is, if you have, in your own opinion, and especially now that we have the government officials here, do you have a way we can bridge between research findings and how the duty bearers like government agencies will be able to take up our findings so that you can have real solution? Especially if we are talking about indigenous, I decided to study my own people as an indigenous person, just so that I can be able to give real, like I said, the insider.
Thank you.
And all that. Thank you.
So, Professor, I don't know if you got it, but it's basically asking about how to translate research into actionable policies and directions in government.
Thank you. I heard the question and I also read the WhatsApp message. Thank you very much for this question. I feel like I am not a very good person to answer this question, and in some ways, you have much better, much more accomplished individuals who are part of Pact, who can answer this question much better than me. I'm not sure if Andy White is there in person, I think he would be a great person to ask this question. Maybe what I say is only channeling a little bit of what I have thought with and learned from Andy White, and that is that it's not always, you can't always influence policy through research, and you certainly can't influence policy through research as you know, and if you don't engage with those who are involved in making decisions from the very beginning. And the other thing that I also learned is that to influence research through policy, you have to be strategic and identify the right individuals or the right agency, the right organizations through which to make this effort. So, in my mind, it is possible to influence research through policy, often in the longer run, if one, but definitely by acting strategically and identifying those who may have some interest in acting on the results of research. And the other thing that we have also talked about, Eddie and I have also talked about, is that often research in the form of in-depth investigations or research articles that get published in journals is not the best medium or the best basis on which to try to bring about any difference in decision making or make any difference in policies. That you have to consider much more strategically what are the kinds of arguments that may have an impact on decision making or on policy making. And academic articles are less likely to have that kind of influence because they're neither written for nor written in a way that would bring about a difference in the way people think, the way decision makers think about what they should do. That in direct engagement, investigation that focus on issues that decision makers care about and that present an argument in more accessible manner, working with decision makers right from the very beginning of the research effort is what has some potential to bring about a change in how research, what research is saying and how decisions are being made.
Thank you very much, Professor Agrawal. I think since we are not doing very well on time, let's move and hear the other keynote address from our own Professor Saronio Lesena, who I believe a lot of you, or if not all of you, know him quite well. I think we just lost connection. But Professor Lesena is a son of Narok. He studied in many institutions. I believe he studied at the University of Nairobi, went and did his PhD at McGill University under Professor John Galati. He's an entrepreneur. He's a believer in local knowledge. He's involved.
Any other questions?
We have decided to move on to the next speaker because of the interest of time. Professor Lesena, I'm just introducing you. I don't know if you're following. So he's going to speak to us about exploring experiences and lessons from non-state actors, NGOs, in the promotion of indigenous-led research and education. Over to you, Professor Lesena. He is also an author. At the desk outside there, you'll see a number of his publications. Feel free to buy them. Professor Lesena, if you can hear me, you can take over the floor. Welcome, and thank you for being available.
Thank you. Is that Moiko?
Yes, that's Steve. Assuring, you can take over.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry I can't be with you, Moiko, and the rest of us, because they have just removed cataracts from my both eyes. but I'm with you in spirit. And so I'm Saroni Olesena. I'm a development anthropologist. I relate to Moiko, to Riamit, and to many others who went to McGill University. And I live in the village of Oleopolos, 30 kilometers west of Narok town. And for 30 years, we have been doing research and education in that village and in other villages inspired by what we started in 1995. And so the focus really has been transforming village by village in Africa. So we have this movement to transform every village in Africa through research and education. Now, before I continue, there are two books that I have written that you can look at, because they are partly based on my experience and the experience of the NGO called Kipok in that community of Oleopolos where I come from, not very far from Narok. The first book is on education and social change. The second book is on research methodology, and I have simplified research processes. And there is a third book that is coming up, the contribution of science, Bible, and Maasai knowledge to the climate crisis. I've been involved in this huge European Union funded projects to say what is the Maasai contribution to climate change. And we are also looking at science, and we are also looking at the Bible. So what I have been given to share is basically a story from Oleopolos, really. Some of our experiences, some of our lessons, some of the challenges we have gone into in the last 30 years, since 1995 to now, 2025, in 10, 15 minutes. And so I'm happy to share that. But before I do that, when I went to university, I was told that you don't do research in your own community, in your own village, in your own area. You do research elsewhere. And so that has been planted very many times in our universities across the world, not to go back and do research and work with indigenous people to begin to do their own research. Because the argument of the research academics is that they will be biased and they will not give us good data in which we can rely on. Well, in Oleopolos, we did not do that. We did not listen to those theories and that perspective and those opinions. We used the anthropological emic approach to begin the journey of research and development in the village and in the community, and indeed have been spreading this message throughout. Now I want you, wherever you are, if you are in the conference or have gone or will finish the conference and go back to where you come from, to use the EMIC EMIC approach to start working with indigenous people in your village, in your community, in your area, in your ward, in your constituency, in your wherever you are, in your neighborhood. If you are in the cities, in your neighborhood, because what we have experienced and the lesson we have learned from Kipok NGO is that local people who are doing research, have been doing research, and will continue doing research. Maasais, for example, say, "Memanya meleno." That is research. That is research. You cannot go to a place before you go and do some research on it physically. Collecting information, analyzing that information, and making use of it is action research. So that is the first thing that we learned when we started doing this. And that is the first thing you will learn, that people already know what research is. Basic research focuses on research for its own sake. The professor before me, you asked him that question. Many times academic basic research is not interested in attaching research to policy, attaching research to solving those human, social, community issues, and that is still valid. They're actually doing it for the sake of pursuing knowledge. And that is what I have partly done since 1970, doing research in order to pursue knowledge, to pursue theories, to develop theories, to create theories. Action research, which is the one that we have been using in the village through KIPOC NGO, is very practical, is very policy linked, is very community needs based, is very community centric. And so the first lesson we learned, our first experience is we were pleasantly surprised to find people who are eager, curious to be involved in research. Towards the end of the 10 or so minutes, we will show you some pictures of actual research that we have been doing over the last 30 years, and especially some that we did in 2021, 22, 23, and now 2025. Another lesson that we learned is involving local people, indigenous people, Maasai in the case of Olepolos, in their own storytelling, in their own discovery of themselves, is a powerful tool that Paulo Freire wrote about in the 60s, that people need to write their own history. And indeed, the people themselves, from an inside-out approach, need to be doing this. They need to be discovering their needs. They need to be discovering their own aspiration, their own visions, their own dreams. They need to be looking for solutions by engaging in inquiry, in discovery. They need to get excited about the economy that they have, the social lives that they have, the knowledge pursuit that they continue to have, the health and the spiritual, in the case of Olepolos and KIPOC, anything to do with cattle and sheep and goats and donkeys and land and grass and rivers and forests and bushes and birds and wild animals. Those became subject matter since 1995, where we have been constantly, since 95, been doing research, and we have written papers and notes and shared this around the world, shared this among us ourselves, and continue to use this to develop our community and to share with our neighbors and others beyond our neighbors. Another lesson we learn is integration of indigenous knowledge and way of knowing. I watched a video the other day between a Chinese and an American. They were arguing over the Chinese way vis-a-vis the American way. And in that 1 hour or so, the argument was that our knowing is better than your knowing. Our knowledge is better than your knowledge. Anthropologically, it is knowledge that is within the context of that society, the context of that community, the context of that village, the context of those people. And so the debate they were having of which one is superior, every knowing, every way of life is a contribution to the general knowing and the general way of life in the world. And so it is better if we ask the question, what is the indigenous knowledge contribution to the general global world knowledge that might be able to solve issues of conservation, to solve issues of climate crisis, to solve issues of education, to solve issues of economy, to solve issues of politics, to solve any and every human endeavor, any and every human challenge. That should be the way to approach it. Another lesson, a fourth one, is strong engagement by indigenous people in the polos in all areas of life, plus the capacity building so that they truly were able to engage in research and education, did help the villagers and the community to actually become economically aware, educationally aware, politically aware. Politically aware to the point where the politicians themselves, at the lowest level all the way to the national level, began to worry that the villagers and the community people had so much knowledge, politically, economically, socially, physically, and they began to worry. They were sending me messages occasionally or running into me, asking what was happening in the community in relation to education and research. And in fact, that awareness of different things, particularly politically, has made the community produce a number of MCAs in the Kenyan context, and a number of MPs. There is one right now incumbent, one senator from the village, from the community, and the current governor of Narok, where the conference is taking place, is actually a fellow villager of mine, because of the awareness that the villagers had and the participation in processes of research and education generally to look at their lives in the polos and beyond. So those are the lessons. Let me finish by mentioning some of the challenges that we have seen over the last 30 years in relation to NGO promoting research and education among its indigenous people, and especially indigenous-led research and education. By looking at, there is a document that I sent to Kenya, which you will be receiving later, but because of technical issues, you don't have that document right now, and so I want to address myself to point number 4, number 5, number 6, number 8, number 10, and Dr. Moiko, they make sure they kindly receive that document, those remarks that I made. It is not very long, so it is very readable, and it is not academic. It is very simple English in order for us to consume it from the point of view of applied research. Point number 4 there says that NGOs often face challenges in developing local human resources and building capacity, which impact the quality and sustainability of their educational and research initiatives. So it is human resource capacity. But this time we are talking about indigenous people. Those people who even never went to school, those people who went to school up to class 2, those people who dropped out, building a capacity to be able to be involved in their journey of development is extremely helpful. Another one is number 10 is the challenges faced by NGOs can perpetuate cycles of marginalization where communities lack the funding and capacity to build their own, and NGOs struggle to secure resources that truly serve community needs. Those are some of the challenges that we face doing Kipok NGO. Another one is the misunderstanding of indigenous issues. External partners and funders may lack a deep understanding of the complexities of indigenous rights, education, and cultural nuances, leading to misalignment with community needs. And so NGOs, like the one that I'm giving you an example of, Kipok, take a lot of time and energy explaining the complexities of indigenous things to those that may want to fund their research and education. For example, our first one was funded by International Development Research Center in Canada, IDRC, very good research and education organization, but we still had months on end of discussion on saying some more about this indigenous group, say some more about your questions of research, say some more about the impact of this education once it is completed. Another one, so that I show you some pictures, maybe number 8 is misunderstood, number 9, number 6 is lack of community engagement. Some NGOs struggle to effectively involve indigenous leaders and community members in program planning and implementation, which is crucial for cultural relevance and sustainability. Just imagine that you have planted yourself in some community or some village or some area, you are an NGO, and the people themselves are asking questions like, so what are these guys doing? What are these guys doing? So a lack of community engagement will actually kill the project, even though it has been planned well, and we are trying as NGOs, as CBOs to implement something, but without the involvement of the leaders, without the involvement of the youth, without the involvement of the elders, without the involvement of the children in children issues as well as parental issues, that project, those programs will not go very far. I want to show you some pictures of actual research and education that we have carried out. I don't know if you will be able to see Dr. Moiko and my many friends who are in the conference, but these are villagers. These are villagers who are themselves now engaged in research and education. We have some young persons, boys and girls. We have some young adults. We have some mothers. Usually when we do these things, we involve everybody in the community, and we have divided the community into 7 clusters, and so every cluster comes up with its own map of the cluster and its own issues that they want to address, including how will they be able to address this. We can go to the next pictures and see some more. Look at the people who are involved in this. And look at that mzee up there. Look at the guys who are sitting in the middle. That is the committee, consists of mothers and elders and young people on the right-hand side, for example, beginning to think about what is happening this week, these 2 weeks, this month of actual research. We have actually produced baselines and documents that we have taken to the donors, we have taken to conferences to share with others on the processes we use in order to get people to think about these things and shape their own lives. More pictures. You can see those who are there being involved in that. We even had an intern from Canada who came and was part of the group. She too was learning about research processes, indigenous people's ways of thinking, ways of doing things, indigenous knowledge. More pictures. You can see those pictures there of younger people. We have a hall there where some of the data has come and people are now presenting them one by one, including this guy who is at the bottom. Some more pictures.
Thank you, Professor.
See, some more happening over there in terms of pictures. So I'll stop there. We have lots and lots and lots of pictures you can imagine from 95. So basically the last statement is, so NGOs, CBOs, do not get tired or do not burn out in relation to promoting indigenous-led research and education. This strategy of focusing on research and research again and research, it produces real transformation of indigenous peoples.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mwiko, and all of you who are in the conference in person.
Let's show our appreciations to Professor Sarundi Alesena by a strong clap of our hands. Professor, we'd like to see if there's a question or two, although we are eating into our lunch hour time, but I think if there's a burning question, one or two for Professor, since he's not been able to join us, then I'm sure he'll be happy to respond. There's one there, one or two. Yes, please, you can go.
Thank you, Professor. I'm Simon Olekerempe. I think Professor know me. I'm a student of, when he started a program known as University called The Village, I attained my certificate when I was doing my BA on leadership. My question, I'm privileged to be doing a case study of nature crime in the Masai Mara, the eastern part. And Professor, I think Auntie Wine said about indigenous knowledge in relation to forest conservation. We started it 2 weeks ago, so I think there is a great relationship on indigenous knowledge from the indigenous people. When we conserve it well, because we have scholars, we may not have reached where professors and doctors have reached, like Steve, but I've been engaged in the case study for the last 1 month. There's a lot in the indigenous knowledge. I've come to realize, because as a CBO, we are privileged to have another block in the Mao. When people were taken out, we are privileged to be given a block to manage as a CBO. So I got interest, much understanding what has happened in the Mao. Many of us in the room who are Kenyans, we have known that there has been a bond of contention in this country for political reason. But we can document, research, paper concept that which could be used, not only with us who are doing it at the moment, but for the new generation of young upcoming leaders. We could have used it well in literature review. Because definitely this is something which can be closed up. So I think I want to ask Professor, are we able to maybe not only just to force, but make the policy makers at the moment, the policy bearers in this country, or for our case in our county, can we use them to put these things to rest about issues to do with land and forest? Because they have been there in memorial.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. In the interest of time, let's make them quick. I will request that we take another short one and then Professor can answer them both. But if I heard you correctly, you're asking again on the issue of how to connect or to transform research into actionable policy. And I'm happy because we have our CCM here from the county government of Kajiado, of Narok, I'm sorry, from Kajiado, who we will allow to say a word or two, and he might be able to shed a little bit of light on that. But one last question before we request Professor to respond to the two. There's a Professor Maikum here from Masai Mara University. And to the point, not more than 3 statements. Just go to the point.
Thank you, Dr. Moiko. My name is Dr. Naikuni. Mine is not a question, but a reinforcement on what has been said in connecting research to policy making. And my contribution to this is that before you think of a research area, broadly think of global problems that government can relate to. Number 2 is that you need to create a network before. We need to be closer to governments and the policymakers so that as we do all this research, it's easily to be sellable in government, be it a local government, that is a county government, or the national government. So there should be that network between us, the researchers, and the government, because by doing that, it will be easily sellable. You need to create our own ways to advocate or pronounce this, that we have these. We need to publish. And that's why in many grants, we are required to probably have someone from government being a research partner. And by doing that, it will be easy to push it into a policy. If you're doing something on youth, you need to have someone within the youth who can push that for the policy making. So joint collaborations and partnership in research will ease the process of bridging research and policy.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Maikumi, for shedding some light on that. Professor Olesena, if you could, in 3 statements or so, respond to the question on how to link again research and policy action, which also Professor Agrawal had spoken about. Are you still online? Professor.
Michael and those that made comments, because they were comments, linking research to policy is very, very important. I want to ask all our county friends who are attending the conference that one way of developing our counties all over the country, as well as East Africa, and the world generally, is to depend on information that has been generated out of research. Now, if you're a student, it is usually a little bit more difficult. Just like the professor said earlier, and Dr. Naikuni is also alluding to that, to touch the research very closely to a particular policy issue, but there is no reason why in Masai Mara University, for example, where Dr. Naikuni teaches, and in other places where we go to school, there is no reason why you could not do a policy problem related research for your certificate, diploma, master's, PhD. For example, that book that you are seeing now on the screen is a book that is based on my PhD. where I was writing indeed about education in Narok and other Ma-speaking areas, including Tanzania, Kwale, Laikipia, Itiamus in Baringo, Kajiado, Narok, and Samburu, anywhere and everywhere. I came to publish that book in order to relate that PhD, those assumptions, those theories that we generated during my PhD period at McGill to what is happening on the ground in relation to what the County of Narok is doing, the County of Kajiado is doing, the County of Samburu is doing, and indeed what our wards and sub-counties are doing. And so yes, it is possible to do that, Dr. Moiko. In relation to the first questioner, I think he mentioned about Mao. The second person who commented on questions and research problem, Dr. Naikuni, has a new book. He has a new book on Mao. And so
Thank you, Professor.
The conference and find out enough about Mao, indeed, because he's a professor too, Masai Mara, and he's actually an author, a fellow author.
Thank you.
He writes books, and his latest is on the Mao. Thank you, Dr. Moiko, and all of you. I wish I were with you physically so that we can pursue more and more questions together. There is another book you have in the conference called Research Methodology, which I also want you to look at, which demystifies research process. People say that research is done in the universities only. Wrong. You can do it in the villages we have done in
Thank you.
Olepolis. You can do it in the counties. You can do it in the sub-counties. You can do it in the ward.
Very true.
You even have research officers in every place so that they generate very empirical evidence based on things that we can use to develop our counties. Thank you, Dr. Moiko, and all of you.
We will make sure to have a look at the books. If you don't know, there's a tent out there, and there's a number of publications and books that you can purchase. But Professor, we wish you quick recovery with your eyes, and we hope that next time there's a sitting like this, you can be here in person, because clearly you have a lot to tell us, and we have a lot to learn from you. The sun has come out strongly as opposed to the last 1 month. It has been very cold, and for that purpose, we need to hydrate. I would like to communicate that there's a water dispenser there. You've been given nice water bottles. Make use of them, refill, and hydrate. As we break for lunch, let me acknowledge the presence of Professor Elifurai Loltaika from Tanzania. He's just joined us. I don't know if there's any other person from Tanzania who has joined us when we were going on. We did a round of introductions in the morning. Anybody else from Tanzania? There's also Professor Patrick Maundu, who has joined us. If you could be upstanding, thank you and welcome. Anybody else who joined us after the tea break, so that we just recognize and appreciate you? If you can just wave your hand. Thank you. Having said that, I don't want to eat into the lunch hour, but CCM from the county government of Narok, our host, we're expecting them in the morning. I believe he's here, is representative of the governor, great colleague, a conservationist. If you could just come in front and say a few words, and then I want to hand this over to the host so that they can give us directions for lunch after the CCM makes a few remarks. And thank you for an engaging and inciting session. Thank you so much.
Okay, good afternoon. My name's Johnson Olesipitiek. the CCM in charge of tourism, wildlife, and culture. It just changed 1 month ago. I used to be in charge of trade and cooperatives and tourism. Mine is going to be very brief. I want to first and foremost thank Mr. Riamit for inviting me to this conference. I'm also happy to have heard from Professor Sena, whom we worked together in World Vision for about a decade, together with my supervisor at the university, Dr. Oleronkei, when I was doing my undergraduate. So mine is to say a big thank you to ILEPA and partners. It's very important to share experiences, or rather lessons learned in your different institutions. And I'm just going to share very brief on what we do here in Narok County, Department of Tourism and Wildlife. It's what has made us progress, because we started in March 2023 in developing a Masai Mara management plan for 10 years, a plan for 10 years. And that we did together with the Greater Masai Mara Ecosystem Plan, also for 10 years. The reason being, the reserve depends on the outside ecosystem. When we talk about the Greater Masai Mara ecosystem, we are talking about the 24 community conservancies surrounding the park. And I'm very happy to say that this is now the third year, and we are at about 58% plan implementation. We've done our roads very well. We've taken care of our community rangers. I have about 500 of them managing the reserve. And we have equipped them with modern equipment. And they are now at the KPR status, so they have modern ammunition. We've done a lot about them, their welfare, their housing, water provision, their food rations. And later on, then we developed a new modern research center, Masai Mara Conservation Center. We are using the Earth Ranger platform to be able to monitor clients, vehicles, wildlife, and anything inside the reserve, and get real-time data, including even off-road driving. Once you just get into the park, we are able to monitor you the 12 hours time you are inside the park. We are also connecting ourselves with the ecosystem, that is the community conservancies, through the plan. And we are implementing the two plans contiguously. And also, we are very wary about the Mau forest. And for the last 2.5 years, hatujaona kiangazi, hatujapata kiangazi. The Mara River flows are very good. So the aquatic life in the Mara River region, they are enjoying themselves. And we are also connecting ourselves with the Serengeti ecosystem. And that's why we've been able to market the Mara. I'm very sorry for those who say that the park fee is very high. We are very sorry because we have to get resources to implement both our plans. And we are not going to change that. $200 is too little if you are coming from America or Eastern Europe. Don't cry over $200. Just come and enjoy the serenity of the Mara. Lastly, but not least, is to say that this partnership is very important to maintain. Now that I have the Directorate of Culture, I think, Mr. Riamit, we need now to work very closer. Personally, I've been doing conservation work for the last 25 years. I was in the NGO world. I have tried to acclimatize working with government. It's not very easy, but you have to understand. Actually, people were talking about research and policy. If you have good policies, then nothing can go wrong. Kwa hayo machache, karibuni sana, asante.
I see my earlier moderator has really delegated. Thank you. Can we appreciate the Minister for Tourism in a better way? Can we appreciate Ole Moiko? Thank you very much for an excellent moderation. Can we appreciate ourselves for patience, staying seated all that long? Thank you for the energy. Really, I just want to welcome us to lunch. I see the Team White is lunch ready. Where is it? When you say main restaurant, you go up the room there where some of us had coffee. We are not going to eat into your lunch. We will recover our time. Don't worry. You have your 1 hour break. The afternoon session is slightly light. Only one input, 2 panel discussion. One on youth, who will be here, and another panel on state policy actors. I think these are the 2. And another Mentimeter. I hope the Mentimeter was very illuminating. It's one way of actually capturing the voice in a very short time. So over to you. Let's go for lunch. It's 2. Can we be here by 3? Settled and started. Enjoy your lunch and thank you. And please network.